Have you ever sat alone in your room, staring at the walls, and wondered, am I just getting in the way now? Have you felt the silence after a busy family gathering? Not because anyone said anything unkind, but because you sensed it, that weight in your chest, that thought you tried to brush off. Maybe they'd be better off without me needing so much help. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know you're not alone. Many older adults, even those surrounded by loving families, wrestle with the quiet pain of feeling like a burden. It's a heavy feeling, one that doesn't always have words. It settles into your bones. And here's the truth. These feelings don't just hurt you. They keep you from fully embracing the deep, irreplaceable role you still hold in your family, your community, and your own life. In today's video, we're diving deep into this emotional struggle. Why do we feel like this? Where does it come from? And more importantly, how do we begin to break free from it? Stay with me as we explore 5 powerful truths that can shift the way you see yourself. And before we begin, I'd love for you to do 2 quick things. First, hit that subscribe button if these kinds of honest, heartfelt conversations matter to you. And second, drop a comment below. Have you ever felt like a burden to someone you love? You don't need to explain. Just a yes or me too is enough to remind others they're not alone. Number 1. The forgotten story of Edna. Edna was 78 when she moved in with her daughter's family after a fall left her needing help walking. She had been independent all her life, a nurse for 40 years, a Sunday school teacher, the kind of woman who baked bread from scratch and always remembered birthdays. But in her daughter's home, surrounded by the sounds of teenage grandkids, busy schedules, and doors that were sometimes closed, she began to shrink into silence. One night, after dinner, Edna overheard her daughter whisper, "I'm just so tired," and that was it. The thought struck her like lightning. I'm the reason she's tired. I shouldn't be here. From that moment, Edna pulled back. She stopped asking for help, stopped joining conversations. She thought she was making things easier. But here's what her family saw. Her quiet retreat wasn't relief, it was loss. Her grandson stopped hearing her laugh. Her daughter missed their morning chats. Her absence was felt more deeply than any of them had words for. Weeks later, her granddaughter finally said, "Grandma, we miss you." You see, Edna forgot something we all forget when we feel like a burden. We are not just a list of needs. We are history. We are presence. We are love, wrapped in stories that younger generations can't get anywhere else. And when we go silent, when we hide, we don't become less of a burden. We become more of a ghost. If you've ever felt like pulling away to make life easier for your family, ask yourself, are you really lightening the load, or are you robbing them of the person they love? Leave a comment if Edna's story hit close to home. Have you ever tried to become invisible in your own family? Let's talk about it. Number 2, the silent trap of comparison. Imagine this. You're sitting at the dinner table, watching your son rush to clean the dishes, while your daughter-in-law checks her phone for work messages. The kids are already back in their rooms, and the house feels like a train running at full speed. You glance down at your hands that once held careers, built homes, raised children, and you think to yourself, look at them go. Look at me now. And then it happens. That silent comparison. That voice that says, they're doing everything. I'm just here. But here's the thing. Comparison is a liar. It doesn't look at the full picture. It only measures what's visible, what's loud, what's moving fast. And it convinces you that value comes from doing instead of being. Psychologists call this the productivity identity trap. As we age and do less of what society deems productive, we're tricked into thinking our worth is fading. That if we're not helping in some obvious, measurable way, then we must be taking up space. But here's a surprising truth. A study by the National Council on Aging found that older adults who stayed emotionally engaged through storytelling, listening, sharing wisdom, contributed significantly to the emotional stability of multi-generational households. Not through tasks, but through presence, through being. It's not your legs, or your speed, or your paycheck that your family needs most. It's your voice, your calm, your life experience in a storm of uncertainty. So the next time you feel that urge to compare, I want you to pause and ask, What do I offer that no one else in this house can? And now, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you catch yourself comparing your value to the younger people in your family? How do you stop that voice in your head? Number 3, the science of feeling like a burden. Let's talk about what's happening inside. Not the family dynamics, not the daily routine, but the internal world where these painful thoughts begin. Because feeling like a burden isn't just an emotional issue. It's a psychological pattern, and it has a name. Psychologists call it perceived burdensomeness. It's part of a well-researched model called the interpersonal theory of suicide, which shows that when someone believes they are a burden to others and feels disconnected from them, their mental health can quickly decline. This isn't just theory, it's science. In a study of older adults living with chronic illnesses, those who reported high levels of perceived burdensomeness were 3 times more likely to experience symptoms of depression. And here's the twist. Their families often didn't see them as a burden at all. The feeling came from within, fed by guilt, shame, and isolation. This shows us something crucial. The feeling of being a burden often has little to do with what your family thinks, and everything to do with how you see yourself. It's an internal script, one that says, I'm too much. I'm holding them back. And like any script, it can be rewritten. The brain has a remarkable ability called neuroplasticity, the capacity to rewire itself based on repeated thought patterns. This means that if we consistently replace self-blaming thoughts with self-affirming ones, we can shift not just how we feel, but how our brain operates over time. So next time that voice whispers, "You're in the way," try answering with this: I am still valuable. I am still needed. I belong. It won't feel true at first, but say it anyway. Rewire anyway. I want to hear from you. Has that inner voice ever told you that you're too much for your family? What did it say? And what would you say back to it now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Number 4, 2 very different afternoons. Let's picture 2 afternoons. In the first, you're sitting on the couch, TV playing in the background. Your son comes home from work, nods politely, says he's tired. You smile, say nothing. Later, your daughter-in-law walks by, asks if you need anything. You say, "No, I'm fine." You always say that. Dinner comes and goes. You eat quietly, then go to your room early. You didn't want to bother anyone. Now imagine a second afternoon. Same couch, same house. But this time, your granddaughter walks in from school and you call her over. You ask about her day. She shrugs, says, "Nothing much." You press gently, and she tells you a story about a boy in her class who got in trouble. You laugh together. Later, your son comes home, looks tired, but this time you say, "I made some notes for that tomato sauce you like, from your grandma's recipe." At dinner, there's a new energy. A story gets told. A memory is shared. And when you go to your room, it's not to hide, but to rest. Same people, same house. What changed? You chose to show up. We often think being less of a burden means being quieter, smaller, more invisible. But that's a myth. When you pull away to protect your family, you don't ease their stress. You remove a source of connection. When you engage, when you offer your presence, your stories, your humor, your listening, you create something priceless, emotional oxygen, the kind that makes a house feel like a home. One small change, speaking up, asking questions, telling a memory, can shift the atmosphere of an entire evening. So here's what I want to ask you. Which afternoon have you been living lately? And what's one small way you could show up differently tomorrow? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Number 5, the hidden strength in asking for help. We're taught our whole lives to be strong, to stand on our own 2 feet, to not trouble others. So when the time comes that we need help, whether it's a ride to the doctor or just someone to open a jar, it doesn't feel like asking. It feels like failing. But what if I told you that asking for help isn't a weakness, it's an invitation? There's a story I heard once about a man named Walter. He was 82, a retired mechanic, tough as nails. After a stroke, he had trouble with speech and balance. His instinct was to push everyone away. He didn't want pity. He didn't want to be someone's chore. So he did everything he could alone, until the day he fell in the garage and lay there for hours. That moment broke something open in him. Not just fear, but realization. He didn't need to prove anything. He'd already proven who he was, through years of hard work, through raising a family, through showing up for people. Now, it was their turn to show up for him. And by letting them, he wasn't being a burden. He was building trust. You see, research backs this up. Studies in caregiving relationships show that when older adults ask for help in clear, respectful ways, their family members report feeling more connected, not less. It gives loved ones a chance to give back, to feel useful, to share love in action. When you say, "Can you help me with this?" you're not just asking for a task. You're offering a moment of closeness. You're saying, "I trust you." And trust is not a burden. It's a bond. So here's a gentle challenge. What's one thing you've been avoiding asking for? One little request that could make life easier, but pride has held it back? Say it out loud. Or even better, share it in the comments. Let's practice asking together. If you've made it this far, take a breath with me. We've walked through some heavy, honest truths today. Stories that might have reminded you of yourself. Thoughts you've quietly carried. Feelings you maybe never said out loud. And now, let me say something to you, clearly and directly. You are not a burden. You are a human being in a different season of life. A season that asks for gentleness, that invites connection, that holds memories and meaning that nobody else in your family, nobody else in this world, can offer in quite the same way. The lies we tell ourselves in silence. Asterisk, I'm in the way, I don't matter anymore. They'd be better off without me. Asterisk, those lies lose their power the moment we speak them out and replace them with truth. And here's the truth. You matter because of who you are, not because of what you can do. You are loved, not for being useful, but for simply being you. So, if something in this video stirred something in your heart, don't let it end here. Leave a comment, even just a few words. Let others know they're not alone. Let yourself know you're not alone. And if this video helped you, if it gave voice to something you've been feeling, please subscribe. Not just for more videos, but to be part of a space where your life still counts, where your story is seen. Because around here, we believe in the power of elder wisdom, and we believe in you. I'm honored you spent this time with me. Take care of your heart, and I'll see you in the next one.